This is a juicy 600 gram bone-in ribeye steak, and I'm going to show you my favourite way to cook it. All you're going to need is your camp oven, lump hardwood charcoal or coals from a fire, and a way to grill it. Salt is really the only thing you need to make a great steak. Ideally, you want to get it out and salt it about 2 hours before you start cooking. So this isn't always practical, but say you're pulling up to camp, when you crack open the fridge for your first beverage, get the steak out, put the salt on it, set and forget for a few hours while you get the fire started and do other stuff. You need a bit more salt than you'd probably first think. In the camp oven, there's a lot of moisture, and a lot of the moisture will leave the steak and the salt will go with it. So you probably need just a fraction more than you think, or really cover the thing. While the steak's doing its thing, I'm going to sort out the veggies. I just throw in a bit of whatever I've got, some roast veggies to go on the side. So nothing fancy here. Some leftover pumpkin from last night's dinner, pre-cut, some potatoes, carrots, and some broccolini. So whatever you've got. Oh, lost the carrot. I cut the potato into wedges so they cook a bit quicker, but also you get kind of that corner. You got more chance of them crispening up and tasting really nice. So I've been favouring my spun steel camp oven for a while, but I'm getting back into using the old girl, the cast iron. This recipe I use a trivet, so that helps raise the floor of the camp oven so the heat can circulate around the food, and also you're not going to burn anything on the bottom of the oven, hopefully. Just using this as a bowl right now, and it serves to lightly oil it. Pinch of salt for the vegetables too. I actually had some rosemary sprigs I was going to throw in there, but when I went to grab them this morning on the way out, my son Heath has moved them somewhere in the house. So yeah, his hobbies included in his terrible twos, hiding things, random yelling, and yeah, just generally causing havoc. So no rosemary today. Whatever you decide to season the vegetables with is probably going to season the steak as well. Something to be mindful of. I forgot to talk about oils. So I'm using canola oil. It's cheap, you can buy it everywhere, and I think it tastes pretty good. It's also a high temperature oil, so when we get to the final stages of this, we need a really high temperature oil. Vegetable oil works pretty well too as another cheap alternative. If you want it to be more fancy, grapeseed oil or avocado oil would work really well, and I've tried both those. What I look for when I salt the steak is the salt crystals will disappear, and then you'll get these pools of liquid on it, and then when those pools of liquid reabsorb or disappear again, or evaporate, that's when you know that a lot of the salt's gone into the steak. Salt isn't just a flavouring for the steak, it actually brings out some of the really beefy, juicy flavours of the steak. So in that way, it's kind of like a flavour enhancer of the beef. So that's why salt is so good, so important for making tasty meat. A lot of people say that baking or roasting broccolini like this isn't a good idea, but works really nice. There seems to be a lot of moisture in the oven when it's cooking, and the broccolini should absorb a lot of that, so you won't end up with sort of dry, bits of green. It should be sort of lush and juicy and absorb everything that's going on in there. These folding fire pits are great for this type of cooking. This one's the Drifta Stockton folding fire pit, which I'm going to have a review video on soon on the channel, so keep an eye out for that. What's really handy is that you can adjust the height with the grill bridge as you're cooking. Drifta also sell these mesh, which I'm convinced is the best way to create an even bed for cooking, better than the cast iron options from other brands. Getting the veggies out just to wipe off the excess oil from the pot and make sure it's uniformly oiled in there. See in there it's a bit lumpy, so just giving that a good oiling. Oil the trivet as well. Charcoal's ready, I better get a wriggle on. Put the steak in. I've got to bend the bone because I don't have a really big camp oven. this is a perfect size. Just don't want the meat to touch the sides and burn. So once it's in, I'm just going to make sure there's nothing touching the top, because it's going to be pretty hot with the charcoal right there on the lid. About half in the bottom. Using the Braai to hold the pot on. Then the rest of the charcoal on the top. Through trial and error, that should take about 20 minutes to do this stage. I used to aim about 50 to 55 degrees in the baking part, but now I aim for about 45. So by the time you let it rest and then you do the sear, you're looking at a final temp of 55 degrees, which is medium rare. So yeah, it's hard cooking like this to get it really perfectly how you want. You've just got to practice a few times and mix it up and try to learn with the exact kit you've got, with the exact kind of coals you've got, how it's going to turn out. If you've watched my older videos, you'll know this is coming to be a revised version of a video that I've already done, and I didn't have this camera, I wasn't making as good of videos, and I really swear by this. I'm calling it the Out There with Dan Steak, so I thought if I'm going to do that, I better make a new video for it. If we're going camping together for the first time, this is probably what I'm going to make you. I've put on a second batch of charcoal just so I definitely know there's enough heat when we go to sear. I think by the time we finish this baking, these coals would have died down a bit. It's looking good. Nearly there. Another couple of minutes. How the veggie's going. Veggie's still a bit hard. I'm going to give the steak just a couple more minutes, get that out, let it rest, and then let the veggies cook for a bit longer whilst I increase the heat. This method of cooking steak is called the reverse sear. So in this way, you bake it to get 90% of the cooking done, and then you hit it hard with a direct heat sear for a minute aside, and that gives you that nice tasty crust. So you've got the nice tasty crust plus that beautiful, however you want, doneness in the middle. What's going on there is something called Maillard reactions, which is a French name, I'm probably saying it wrong, but essentially the amino acids and the heat, it causes a reaction, and you end up with that that blackening or darkening of the steak around the outside, but not burnt inside. So that's what you're trying to do. I've got a secret ingredient, and that is apple juice. So this helps promote those Maillard reactions by basting it on the steak before you sear it, but it also caramelizes and chars itself to give you a little bit of extra kind of charry flavor. So yeah, that's my hot tip. I'm going to dab the steak down. You'll see, as I said, there's a bit of moisture in there, so get all the kind of water moisture off, and then baste with this each side. It's looking good. That'll do. Put the coals back in. Trying to avoid it dusting my veggies with ash. Should have wrapped this up before that. Just let those cook in their own juices still while we do the steak. Next batch of charcoal, let that settle a moment. Adding straight on top there. Using this smaller charcoal and falls through the gaps of my charcoal starter, so didn't want to leave a pile of charcoal on the ground, but it's sort of inevitable. Get some of that water moisture off. It's looking real nice. It's going to come good. So, last secret ingredient. I've got these red gum coarse wood chips, and I'm going to use those, and hopefully they catch and create some direct flame, which will add to the heat and the smoke will add to some smoky flavour. So I'm just going to give that a sec, and hopefully some of them catch. Put the steak right on. I put the steak right on the end of the Osprey, which I'll show you why in a sec. I'm going to get rid of this entirely. If you don't sear the fat properly, you can get really tough fatty bits, and it kind of ruins the experience. If you can get those a bit softer, make them really nice and chewable. As you can see, I'm just holding it there. Have a listen. So good. Oh, this is where it starts to smell so good. About 1 minute aside, that's all it takes. Alright, have a look at this. That's what you're after. I'm going to wrap it up again in alfoil for probably just 5-10 minutes while I set the table, and let's eat. Got some veggies out there. That's not what I came for. Ooh, how does that look? So good. I better take some shots of it before I start eating it. With a lot of meats, depending on the cut, it's good to cut it in a certain direction, but the ribeye is not one of those cuts. You can cut it any way, and it's pretty forgiving or good. I've ended up a bit more well done than I thought I would, so I put that down to just not going straight from the bake to the sear, and just not being able to get the heat in to the coals. So you live and learn, but yeah, when you're cooking like this, it's never like cooking on an induction stovetop or at home, or where you know exactly where the dial was last time and how long you left it for. It's much more organic and dynamic when you're cooking on fire and charcoal. Still bloody good though. The ribeye, or the Scotch fillet, probably my favourite cut of beef, just because it's such a massive beef flavour. You know, it's not about, you can cook it to make it tender, but it's really all a cut that's all about the flavour. Just got some barbecue sauce. This one's an American one, Stubbs. It's quite nice. And yeah, it's got that vinegary, tangy, very peppery, you know, slightly hot taste to it. So a little bit of zing, but really the beef flavour, when you get this right, you don't need to add much to it. Today's actually Mother's Day. I've snuck out just as the sun was coming up. We've got lunch at my mum and dad's, and then dinner at my in-laws. So full day. I'm already knackered. We'll see how it goes. But where I was going with that was a steak like this, I could you know, have a crack at polishing off myself. But today I'd better take some home. You know, $25 steak. This will feed a family of 2 adults and a couple of kids, no worries, with some veggies. So although this looks like an expensive bit of meat, it was about 25 bucks. You know, you're not going to do this every night at home, but as a centerpiece meal for camping, you know, something nice, something different, still simple. Yeah, this is a great way to do it. What I love about cooking this way in the bush with a camp oven and a grill directly over fire is that it doesn't require much. You know, this is a restaurant quality meal using very simple tools that is pretty much accessible to anyone. And that's what's really cool about showing you this is, yeah, hopefully it inspires people to lift their game when they're out camping. I'm going to turn the camera off and have one last crack at this, enjoy this beautiful weather, contemplate life. I do have one more thing to show you though. If you've enjoyed this, make sure you subscribe. If you join my email list, I'll send you a handy reference sheet which has cooking meat temps in it, which can be handy to put in your glove box. I'll be starting a Patreon very soon if you want to start me monetarily, support me monetarily. A link will be in the comments when that happens. So good. You know, I made it to my 21st birthday and I graduated with a degree from university. I'm married. I've had 2 wonderful children, but somehow I feel like this should be part of the human experience. And I think anyone that doesn't experience this is missing out.